Well, thank you. My name is Tim Williamson. I'm one of the co-founders of Nieux Society, also one of the co-founders of the Idea Village 20-something years ago. Born and raised in New Orleans and came back in the late 90s to get involved in something called the internet. And this is a very interesting thing tonight. Patrick and I were talking about that, how the room has changed in the last 20 years. And I've personally witnessed a bunch of waves of innovation. The first one was a wave of desperation. Back in the late 90s, we all moved home. That's the Robbie Vetrano, and we moved back home to the city in the late 90s. That was really not a great spot. And we're all starting internet businesses. We found a cool bar called the NOLA bar, started drinking. And out of that came the Idea Village and accelerator programs and pitch contests. And the thing about it is you really didn't know something special was happening, but there was a movement, a small movement. And as you guys probably know, in 2005, Katrina sort of halted that a little bit based off that destruction. The second wave happened, ironically, the first one was out of desperation. The second one was destruction around 2009. The wave of new talent coming into town. In 2009, a group of us went to something called the IP building. You might remember the IP building? Oh, yeah. Huddled up. The city was coming out of a disaster. The Saints just won the Super Bowl. But out of that building, you saw the ecosystem form for those schools, Propeller, all these different programs coming out of it. You saw NOLA was conceived, New Orleans Entrepreneur Week was conceived out of that building. $2.8 billion of exits came around 2020. And you basically saw a sense of belief that we could do it. And then COVID comes around, and Ida was sort of remarkable. You got to remember, Ida was awful. But people didn't stop building this time. People kept building through that time. We believe there's another wave happening right now, and you guys are part of it. And the wave is not about desperation or destruction, it's about opportunity. You've got an incredible ecosystem. You've got universities like Tulane and UNO are deeply engaged. You've got capital, I think $100 billion from capital coming into the city. And you've got the green industry forming, you've got wind forming. Right now, for the first time, we're actually prepared. And tonight, to frame the conversation, we have brought in New Orleanians. This is what's interesting. New Orleanians working at Adobe, Google, and Meta to talk about what's happening on the West Coast. Let's get ahead of the curve this time, see what's happening. We also brought Patrick Comer, who is, as you know, the founder and CEO of Lucid, sold for $1.1 billion. Round of applause, please, tonight. To talk about what he sees next. So I'm going to quickly introduce, and we're going to dive deep. And hopefully coming out of this, you walk out not only inspired, but now learning about what's next in technology, what's next, and this time we're going to get in front of it. We have Adam Wood, who is the Manager, Customer of Engineering, AI Optimist, Web3 Strategist, Artist with Adobe. Kendrick Calvin with Meta, a Senior Technical Project Manager for Meta. And also give a round of applause to his mother, who's here today. Mom is here. We're trying to figure out what her son does. Office Oregon with Google, lead growth and community for AI and Google, for Google Labs and part of the project. Patrick Comer, founder CEO of Lucid. Welcome. What we want to do is just go around the table and tell us what is, we want to go deep in the boardrooms, different organizations. What are they talking about in Silicon Valley? Things that you're not going to read about yet. Things about you see your organization's position. Start with you, Adam. With Adobe, what are the things you see happening?
We can't go too deep into the boardrooms, but we'll just scratch the surface. But what I'm seeing, this started probably last year. Our CEO, asked the crowd, about 10,000 people, who all has heard of ChatGPT? Maybe 10 people in the crowd raised their hand. And this was the start of January of last year. this last all hands, every business unit that we have has been impacted by AI in some form or fashion, whether it's creative, analytics, data. Every possible business unit that you hit on is being impacted and is creating efficiencies throughout the whole company. And this isn't just happening at Adobe, they're seeing it at Meta, they're seeing it at Google. And I think I think everybody sees the opportunity and potential behind it, and now it's, okay, how do we get ahead of it? How do we capitalize on this? And how do we, obviously all these companies want to make money off of it, but there's kind of a big strategy behind it, and there's an arms race, so to say, on who's going to be at the forefront of it. And I think Adobe's position, themselves nicely because they're kind of sitting in between and being agnostic to the different tools there, because all of these tools are ultimately going to get pulled into Adobe's product suite and everything. So I don't think they're looking to create their own AI or anything like that, but they're just saying, hey, we want to integrate with all of this and make it beneficial.
You mentioned something about productivity and what's changing now with how people bring value.
So there's been a big kind of paradigm shift in terms of, in the past, we've all been looked at in every job we've had, how productive have we been? How can we be productive? How many hours do we work? How often are we in the office? All these things, these metrics that they quantify our existence on. But what we're seeing now is creativity is replacing them or leveling the playing field. So you're seeing more of a productivity is replacing creativity is replacing productivity in the form of you have an idea, you can implement it so much quicker now than you possibly could in the past, where one idea could replace 20 weeks of work that you put into it. So,
Can I ask you a question? What has changed that allows you to execute on an idea faster at Adobe, or is it something else?
I don't think it's necessarily within Adobe. I think it's across the board with regard to generative AI.
So basically, AI gives you permission to be creative in your role.
Exactly.
In a way that wasn't possible before.
You have autonomy now to do things and make your role much more efficient and implement your ideas a lot quicker. Whereas before you might need developers, you might need coders, you might need a whole team to implement something. Now, and this isn't just for Adobe, this is for anyone.
Is there a particular example that you're connected to that?
There's a ton of use cases that we've developed, like just me personally, just with work. Just being able to, think of a way, where there are friction points in my role, and what's creating friction for our customers and for us to deliver value to our customers, and finding ways that we can streamline that and do it in a way where we're not having to go to engineering and get engineering involved. We can just, anyone on our team can do it. I'm not a super tech person, but I can go and get what I need done and make it more efficient that way.
If you were to pitch Adobe's projects, one product that they could try that makes it easy to get involved with AI.
Firefly is probably the quickest for anyone. It's in beta. Anybody can go and prompt engineer, put in a prompt, blue sky, trees, and you'll get it generated on the fly. So that's probably the quickest one to dabble in AI.
Awesome. All right. Bring us inside Facebook or Meta. Tell us what you guys are thinking about.
So there's definitely a race to being in the forefront of AI, which we're all aware of right now. But I think Meta has shifted its ideology just a little bit to be intentional on what we're delivering. There's a mindfulness of how technology is being used. We all have seen a lot of misinformation in the media, the news, information spreads quickly. So we want to just make sure that people are using products and our products in the correct way. And it's hard to monitor that. Obviously, the internet is the internet. People will use technology how they will utilize it. But if we can just kind of get in front of that a little bit and soften that, I think that's how we shift. Personally, I think we should all unplug sometimes, touch grass, if you will. Because there's a real world out there, right? But it's important for us to just be mindful about how individuals are utilizing technology.
I know you're exploring the metaverse. Or
Yes, the metaverse. What do you think?
Off the record, no, just kidding. The metaverse is the metaverse. I think the metaverse is ahead of its time. I don't think we're quite there yet as far as being able to utilize it in an everyday way. I think you have things like the Oculus, which has many benefits, especially like for students who are studying medical or medicine. You'll be able to like see the inside of an actual human body. If you're a teacher and you want to kind of immerse your students in a traveling experience, they've never been to Paris, but you want to bring Paris to the classroom, you can use those Oculus devices to be able to, be in that real world. So there are definitely like use cases for things of that nature.
Can I go back to how is AI impacting your role specifically? Or is it not? I'm just curious as to how you're engaging.
So I'm one of those annoying managers who like to touch everything. Like I like to be involved in product. I like to be involved with design. To your point, I think it's just kind of like allowed me to move at a faster pace. I'm not waiting on product decisions that will take 2 months, 3 months for sign off. I can go in and be able to create a mock-up and give that information to my team. So it just allows me to move at a quicker pace.
You're from New Orleans, you work for Adobe and Facebook. Remote working, just curious. You can work from New Orleans and work for Fortune 100 companies.
So remote work, yes and no. Remote work is, I don't know if this applies to you all, but like my Meta didn't particularly have an HR home base here, so I had to like reroute where I'm working from. So I'm on paper, I'm based out of California, but I live here, so I can't go through Louisiana to get that employment. So there's like a lot of like reworking that you have to do.
It's called arbitrage.
Are you saying you don't have Nexus in Louisiana from a tax basis?
I would say.
All right, Arthur moved here from Silicon Valley, been here for 4 years, and is also part of the Rolling Elvi. So you're deep into on the board of Rolling Elvi, so.
You won't recognize me in costume, but not only Rolling Elvi, I also do the rockers. So I'm head of the dance crew. So yeah, I'll bust a move later.
Let's talk about
Let's talk about Google. Well, first, just like look at this crowd. This is incredible. This is New Orleans. Like, give yourself a round of applause. Yeah, people to show up in Silicon Valley. So what's happening at Google? I'm going to be a little different and separate the way I see things and how Google is solving problems in the near term and long term. I think what you're hearing is productivity is a common theme. And I think Google, there's not many LLM providers, large language model providers in the industry. There's only a few companies that are able to resource those. So I think in the near term, you're seeing productivity is one theme that's coming out. You're seeing the ability to give tools, large language model tools to use large language models for developers, for anyone out of the box. So I think you're seeing that coming and emerging, not a surprise. I think you're starting to see a trend. Hasn't happened to great scale yet, but you're starting to see in the near term verticalization of large language models. So this is, I am a doctor. I want to have a doctor-specific trained model that gives me output on, I'm a specialist neurosurgeon. So I want an LLM that does specifically this. So you're starting to see verticalization as a theme that pops out, specifically at Google. I think the next theme that you're starting to see beyond verticals is just the idea that there's lots of modalities in the world. So the modalities that you see today through large language models are text, predominantly text, text in, text out, text and image in, text out, text in, create an image. You're starting to see these modalities, but the modalities that you haven't seen yet, you can use your imagination. There's a lot that are coming, and I think you'll see that in the near term. I think the thing that people aren't aware of, and is kind of an aha moment. It's not oh my god, I can't wait till this feature comes. But the biggest problem we have today with large language models is that there's only a few people, a few companies in the world that can actually resource these things. GPUs, TPUs, or chips in general to run these large language models are very, very expensive. There's only a few companies and providers that can do this. And so the hope is, that you will hopefully see in long term, is that we start to not only democratize the tools that live in our pockets, the large language models, We actually start to democratize the access to build large language models for yourself. And so you might see a trend towards open source. You might see a trend towards startups like yourselves, hopefully here in this room, starting to create efficiencies on how chips are used, create efficiencies on how large language models are used, reducing the number of parameters needed, but also while increasing the quality of the model. So I think you're starting to see that is probably the biggest, I wouldn't even say near term, I would say that's in the short, long-term vision of what's next in big, because it's going to only get worse as we grow these large language models, we train these large language models, it's only going to get worse from a resourcing perspective. So I hope this is the next big frontier, so that we can start to democratize this, because it is very expensive to run.
So you and I talk about where are we with AI? Are we early, late? Do we even know what it is? And what we into you guys? What is it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I almost feel like this is a trick question to me. It's like, is it fake? Is it? I think we're very. Here's the thing. I was listening to an interview recently with Jeff Bezos. I was talking to any Lex Friedman fans in the house.
Did you also do Jeff Bezos after?
Yeah, and then I did that after. That's exactly right. And Jeff Bezos says something very interesting. He says, generative AI is not an invention, it's a discovery. And I think that's actually a very good point, because the telescope, inventing of the telescope was an invention. Finding stars and planets, that's a discovery. And so what people don't realize is that large language models, machine learning, the underlying basis that trains these things, it's been around forever. This is not a new invention at all. What we did was we made it simpler. We provided the large language model that has been machine learned, that's easy access for anyone. So we put an interface on it, a nice interface for end users to use so that anyone can use. It's more of a discovery. So it's hard for me to say that it's the early days, because it's been around forever. But what I will say is that the reason I would say that we're in a don't know what's happening next phase, and it's from that perspective early, is that the quality is actually quite bad. And so yes, it's really good at bullshitting. Humans are very good at bullshitting, which is great, but it's actually pretty bad from that perspective. And so although you might have it write a document for you, and you might have it write some code for you, it actually doesn't, beyond that, it doesn't provide much value. You still need a doctor's, you still need expert advice from a human to give you that expert advice, as opposed to a large language model. And us as humans just need to change the way we adapt and think about robots helping us versus machines too, so there's like a whole cultural shift. But I would say we're in the early days from that perspective of model quality is bad, and I don't know if it's getting better, to be honest. And the reason I say that is large language models are the best autocomplete in the world. They are trained on lots of data, but they are the best autocomplete. Autocomplete doesn't create creativity. It's a great tool in your pocket. It's a great co-pilot for you. It doesn't create creativity, and this is what you and I were talking about. Just to expand on this, if I were to say, what's a field, or what's the next big thing for large language models? Who benefits the most? If I were going somewhere, you asked me, like, where's the puck go? If I were going somewhere, a job, I would say being a creative person is actually way more valuable, and being a creative person that understands these tools can be way more valuable than being somebody who's trying to use a large language model to build a website or to build an app. I think it's way better to be the person who's going to creatively challenge these things to create interesting things, as opposed to a large language model that's been trained on lots of data. It's all going to kind of look the same. And so.
Okay, New Orleans. So creativity.
We should be able to do that.
I think we got that one. And Patrick, we'll come to you. You as an entrepreneur, and remember being in Launchpad 12 years ago, and you had this crazy idea. You sold your company, and now I imagine you're not retired, or you're
Busier than I thought I would be, Tim.
I know that. Helped start this. We're one of the co-founders of this Nieux Society. But I'm not sure what you're thinking about now, because as you're listening to Arthur, Kendrick, and Adam, And I know you're listening and you're wondering, you're tinkering. Tell me what you're thinking about what's next. What do you see? What you're listening for? What do you hear? What do you see?
Well, what I first think about is if I were in this room and I was going to start something, what do I want to hear? Or what do I need to hear? Because from my point of view, this is the most exciting time to start a company since 2008, 2010, right after the last kind of financial crisis. Because if you can get started now, where it's weird, at the beginning of a tech revolution or discovery, if it works now, you're going to have a long bull run in front of you to build. So right now is like the best possible time to get going. And the question is, well, what do I build? If I want to do it, what am I actually going to do that's going to be worthwhile? And I think that AI presents the best attack vector for any existing SaaS company. Meaning, I won't mention you on stage, but any SaaS company or technology company you know today is probably not day one AI. They are day one, not even SaaS, they're like day one internet companies. And they have evolved into SaaS companies because that's a cool thing to do for as long as that lasts. That's point number two. And then now they're starting to quickly get into AI. Some of them are moving fast. Some of them have the base LLM models, and some of them are pretty good at building quickly saved idiots. But every single technology company that you know of is not AI first. And the reason I bring it up, if we go back 20 years to the .com era, I remember when it was cool to add .com to your company name. I like pets.com as a great example, right? Just because you added .com to your company did not make you an internet company from the ground up. Not culturally, not technology, not your customers. You were not embedded internet. You were just trying to add it on as a gloss, as a schmear. It will be internet. Same thing is happening now. We're doing research in research companies, and the number of them have changed their URL to .ai, trying to say it's just a layer of gloss and hoping you'll think we're more valuable because I said AI versus not. This is a massive opportunity because those companies that day one build AI first are going to outperform any historical traditional company. Every tech company today should be extremely afraid. And why are they moving so fast into AI? So they're hoping not to lose their position to all of you out in the room. So there's this moment where you can go crush them on efficiency because they still have their existing processes, their existing customers, their existing everything that they have to hold on to, while you can outbuild and basically perform all of them, period. And I don't see anyone shaking their head saying you can't do it. I think the opportunity is big right now to move after it. Where it impacts me the most, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the playing field has never been more level across the board.
The other thing that's happening, and I guess we listened to similar podcasts, and all Pod Shemant this Friday was talking about maybe it's the beginning of the end of SaaS. That with AI being the great equalizer, maybe the whole SaaS business model may actually change for the first time in, say, 10, 15 years. That all SaaS really was the arbitrage between the internet starting and how hard it was to do R&D or development with engineers. And now that every engineer is getting better with a co-pilot of some sort, and every non-engineer can actually do engineering type tasks immediately, suddenly the number of engineers available has gone up dramatically. I'll put it for me. Am I the best coder? No. But my special sweet spot is when I get into Excel or Google Sheets and can program formulas. That's where I totally geek out. And how many times have I gotten better because I actually type in what I need into pick any one of them and say I need to solve this particular function, and it spits out the exact right answer, and I have to look at the code and try to figure out how it did it, but it's right, and it took me this amount of time. That level playing field across every single organization, everybody in the room, is going to have profound effects far beyond whether or not you own an LLM or actually have the ability to scale your own kind of function with your own GPUs or et cetera. So I'm excited about that part. The thing that really gets me jazzed up is what you've already said is I was at the Idea Village Accelerator pitch. So if you wanted to be one of the top 12 companies this year, about 20 or 30 actually do pitches. And I was in the room to officially, quote, judge. And I've been doing this for a long time. I think Tim, you first invited me to judge like 15 years ago or something. Every year I get the same question. How are the companies? And it's a quality of company question. And every year I have to answer the question. It's getting better. Some version of that story is getting better. This year what was profound to me was not about the companies. It was about the people in the room, the number of them, but how qualified they were to talk about how to build businesses from scratch. Literally, this ecosystem is now mature. And that's exciting to me because it's not just about, do you have an idea? Can you hire the engineer? Everything necessary to do great things, we have in our own community. From capital to people, everything. And that's a very different place than we were 10, 15 years ago. And that's what I get excited about. I get excited about not what I'm saying on the stage here today, but what y'all are going to go talk about and what companies y'all are going to go form based upon whatever it is you're going to go do. Just remind me to try that, write a check, that's all.
Remind them to write a check. So that, and get ready, come to you guys for questions in a second, but this wave is different. It's opportunity. This wave is different. We have talent, we have capital, we have partners in place, and we're sitting here ready to go. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. Speaking to the folks in the room, that hockey puck question, I want to know, Adam, where's the puck go? Yeah, where do you see the opportunity? If you're challenging New Orleans and say, guys, this is where you go. This is where you go build. In your mind, where's the puck go?
So I'll go back to the gap between creativity and starting a business or the idea you have that you want to generate. That gap is so small now. Like if someone has an idea, they can go and implement and create a business in less than a day. To be honest, like it doesn't. You don't have to get investors. You don't have to go find a team of developers. You can realistically go and get something implemented tomorrow. You know, if you have that idea. And I think nurturing the culture and creativity we have down here and being able to implement it in a timely and efficient manner is going to set us apart from, New Orleans has always been so far behind in terms of adoption. Like being able to adopt quicker and adopt and be agile to the market is going to be where I see us benefit.
It seems like artists and entrepreneurs can build relationships.
Absolutely. So Tim hosted artist speed dating. It was connecting entrepreneurs and artists with one another and having, a 5-minute session with each person, asking questions, and something like that. I think that gap between, like I said, is just getting narrower and narrower. You're not having to have, back and forth for weeks and months to get an idea across. You just happen instantly.
All right, Kendrick. What's going to make you leave now that I tell your mom I got the big one?
Hilarious. So, visibility is something I think that we should be kind of focusing on here. Again, I think there's even in this room, there's huge talent in this room. I shouldn't have to go to California in order to secure a position with a great company. I should be able to do that here. Kind of similar to what you've done and with the opportunities that you've provided. We should be able to have those opportunities in New Orleans. New Orleans is a city with great food, great spirit, great people, but we shouldn't have to leave in order to find that career fulfillment. So I think if we use our profiles, our LinkedIn profiles, our networking amongst each other to show recruiters that the talent is here, then they'll have no choice but to just come here and keep us here. So I think visibility is something that we should be focusing on.
How was that answer, Mom?
Good.
Y'all are She's finally learning from me. That's beautiful.
It has been a mystery for quite some time.
Try explaining sample to me.
Arthur, tell me where you go. Okay, where's the big idea? Where should everybody be spending time researching? And tell me what is it and how do we learn about it?
All right, because I love making things more complex than they need to be always, I'll hit this from a few different angles. I think angle number one is, and there's no mode around this, but I say this as there is a short gap right now of finding niche things that require a lot of time and repetitive, a lot of time to solve, but they're niche. Content creation is a great example. Find these niche things and go use an LLM to solve that. And don't wait time to raise capital. Don't wait for time to start the company. Use generative AI to do this as quickly as possible. But there's no moat around this. But there is a short gap, a period of time where people are trying to solve this. So if I were doing anything, you could start this today. The next thing, I think I would say, one of the beauties of generative AI, although it's been around for a long time, it's finally been accessible by everyone. It's finally accessible by everyone. their universities are just catching up now on how to use generative AI. You're starting to see classes being taught by Google, or content provided by Google and OpenAI and these other, Anthropic, etc., that are starting to hit the university scene to educate, to either attach themselves to courses, get online courses, etc. This is all catching up. You do not want to miss this opportunity to dive deep depth, not breadth. This is a really important time because this will pass you very quickly. And if you don't have depth here, it will move very quickly without you. So I think depth is very important, being a knowledge expert. And I would actually give this advice to anyone, anytime, regardless if it was now or yesterday or many years ago. Depth is important. Be an expert in something. I think the third thing. So I was just talking to somebody earlier today, and they can raise their hand and say, it was me, I gave Arthur this idea. Figure out how to monetize open source. And I really say that because open source is going to become a king very, very quickly. You're going to see the industry, generative AI specifically, you're going to see the industry move so fast that if someone can figure out how to monetize effectively open source, you will be solving a problem that has been, epidemic that has been in existence for a long time. And this problem is only going to become more and more forefront. So,
open source because what's the hidden force driving open source in AI?
Because the LLMs are monopolized at this point in time. And so you don't have much control over what the LLM can do. You can fine tune it, you can ground it, you can do all these things, but at the end of the day, your content is still owned by the LLM and the provider. And so by creating this open source economy, by removing the cloudness from the cloud access from this, moving these things onto device, removing the ability for the LLM provider to have your data, to log your data, to use your data for training, is only going to become more and more, it's already becoming a requirement, but it's going to become more and more of a requirement for all these enterprise companies that I think anyone who can figure out, so we're definitely moving to open source for that reason. It's also, by creating an open source economy, you also hopefully create innovation with LLMs. So now you're starting to democratize the expertise of an LLM. Again, when I speak LLM, I'm speaking the model, not the access to the model. All of us using the access of the model, this is fine. But the number of people that can build these things for people to use is very limited. And so, again, going back to resourcing is an issue, knowledge is an issue. When I say resourcing, I mean chips is an issue, knowledge is an issue, and data governance is an issue. And so I think moving to this open source model allows people to start to come up with creative startups and creative ways to start to democratize these things and create the ownership, bring it back to the individual.
Isn't Anthropic kind of leading the charge on that?
There are actually Facebook, Anthropic, OpenAI, I think everyone in the near term, that's why I was saying, like in the near future, I actually think this is going to be the next big frontier that you're going to see near term, that you're going to see is on-device, open source and on-device is going to be a big push. Anthropic leading the charge? No, I think across the board, all the big companies are leading the charge.
I thought you were saying it was going to be a reaction to the executive order from the White House on AI regulation that was going to push everything to open source fast so it gets it out of hands.
So, so regulation is always an issue, right? So I think regulation doesn't stop innovation. And so, not even close, right? And so I think whenever I hear regulation, yes, I think about, anyone familiar with DMA 5.2? Okay. GDPR, great. So there's a few of us, fantastic. Those people hanging out at the bar have no idea. They just keep drinking, just keep going. Data governance, regulation, all of these things, they don't slow innovation. And so I don't think that you're going to see that slowing. And I'll also add to the perspective, you're also saying regulation from we don't want robots we don't want AI to take over the world. I don't think anyone is thinking about AI taking over the world. I'm sure there are people thinking about that, for sure, but I don't think that that's the reason that regulation is stepping in. I think regulation is stepping in and being vocal because data governance is important. The ability to know how your data is being used, how your data is, how people are monetizing your data, and to just essentially at the end of the day have control of your data. I don't think that we are close. I'm sure Elon Musk and his personality would disagree with this. So I hope you tag this as you post this video to him, because he cares so much about me. But I don't think that that's the fear that robots take over. I think there's still lots of control over how these models perform. Now it doesn't negate the fact that we still need a bar, a safety bar, a control bar over how these models handle the returning of data. Like, we don't want, for example, people to say, how do I make a bomb? Or give me child pornography. Right? These are not okay. But the open source community has very rarely gone the route of trying to enable bad actors and activity, and has actually gone the route of creating a better models, more democracy over access, better controls over how data is handled, as opposed to single entities dictating how the model performs and outputs. So I think history has shown that open source is a better model.
Okay.
I'll jump into a little contrarian
I love that.
point of view. Learning lessons from internet. Let's make the assumption that the AI change is like the internet change. Revolution. So I don't think it matters who has an LLMs, just like we don't really care about Cisco anymore. Routers were a big deal until they weren't. Speed of internet access was a big deal until it wasn't, until it was ubiquitous. I think these high capital intensive projects will get built, someone will make money, and we'll all forget about it. Because it'll just be part of the infrastructure of, well, I'll just call it AI, right? This doesn't matter. I think about Google was not the first search engine. It was probably the 6th or 7th that I used because the beta of Google came out. And my first thought was, wow, under the search engine, this is terrible. But no one remembers Alta Vista, and it was great, right?
City search.
So, City Search, was Facebook the first social media platform?
Tom is nobody.
Come on! I still remember Friendster. I hated Friendster, right? My point is that my advice is simple. Go big, right? I'll go the opposite of niche. Go as big as you can imagine, because every single product and business model out there has an attack vector associated with it you can use called generative AI. Everything is available right now. And you don't even have the first person to have the idea of using AI with something to dramatically shift it. You could be the second, third, or fourth, and end up being Facebook/Meta or Google. Adobe is a different path, of course, but my point is, yes, you can go down niche. That would have been my advice if we were just focusing on SaaS, because the availability of next SaaS ideas tend to be very vertical or very niche. Something as esoteric as sample can go big, right? That's like a third generation B2B SaaS niche that no one knew anything about that could become a big deal in the third generation of internet SaaS companies. I don't think you can do that with AI. I think you can go right in the sweet spot of right in the middle and just go for it. And the odds that you make it are bigger now than they've ever been before. So that's my point of view. Go big, go home. Let's make it happen.
All right, I want you to end, and then we're going to give a couple questions to the group. What would be your advice, Patrick, to the world's ecosystem? This is a moment. We talked about, here we are. We're talking about what the world's talking about. We have an opportunity. What's your advice to the room? Did you got
My advice is simple. Just say yes and just do it. Whatever the yes is, just say yes. Right? Seriously. Whatever the person is asking you, or actually whatever's holding you back, just say yes to doing it and go for it, right? This is the best opportunity, is this moment to start the next thing or join the next big thing. So my advice is just say yes right now.
say what if it works? All right, I want to close it out. This has been amazing. It's something that Patrick, you just said about who's in the room. The fact that we've got remarkable folks living in the world with global companies. We've got you guys in the room. We're sitting here in this opportunity. This is a moment when you feel like there's a wave. We are in a moment right now. I'd love to end it with we always need a deadline or a goal line. If you think about next year, we're going to have the Taylor to Mick run. Taylor Swift is coming, October 24, right? And then we got Sugar Bowl, Super Bowl, Mardi Gras. We've got Nieux, Tulane Book Fest, French Word Fest, Jazz Fest. That's 8 months where the world's going to be looking at us and saying, what are you guys doing? Now I'm convinced, the Taylor to Mick run, this group's going to decide that. So the question is, what do we do? What's the story going to be about New Orleans? What do we be talking about? And what are we going to start? So do me a favor, a great round of applause.